of the House of Commons Standing Committee on National Defence. Pursuant to Standing Order 102 or 1082, and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, October 2nd, 2025, the committee is meeting to complete the original study of the Department of National Defence and Canadian Armed Forces contaminated sites, which began the previous session. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format, pursuant to the standing orders, and members are attending in person and remotely using the Zoom application. Before we continue, I ask participants to consult the guidelines on the table. These measures are to help prevent audio and feedback incidences and to protect the health and safety of our interpreters. And as a reminder, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. And for members on Zoom, please use the hand raise function. And for interpretation, use the earpiece and select the appropriate language channel. Again, all comments should be addressed through the chair. So let's begin. I would like to welcome our witnesses. We have Sarah Perrault, Mairesse from Terrebonne. We have Serge Villandre, who's the Chief Administration Officer for the City of Terrebonne. I'm sorry, Your Worship, you're from City of Shannon, correct? All right. So I'll start with opening remarks, and I'll pass it over to the Mayor for you to proceed.
D'abord, merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Before we begin, I was very surprised when we were invited to appear with regards to the contamination at the City of Shannon, because it was 20 years ago, and we're only hearing this topic being discussed because there's a committee, there's a study on it. So I've been asking myself a lot of questions about what the objectives of this committee are in hearing people on contaminated sites. Is it to improve communication, accelerate processes? So at the outset, I just want to say that I'm flabbergasted. So Shannon was very significantly contaminated. It's one of the most impactful contaminations in Canada, and it's trichloroethylene. 26 years ago, the TCE contamination, we found out about it, and it was detected not by the federal government, or the notice did not come from the federal government, but rather from the provincial government. The National Capital Health Commission gave us the heads up because they were doing tests on the drinking water for the people of Shannon. They had some doubts at that point in time. And in any case, the information came from the government of Quebec. So we were horrified and quite surprised to find out. And I was a resident of the City of Shannon. And a couple of years after, I became an MLA, or an MNA rather. So that is why I wanted to join and share my point of view. So it's a very significant level of contamination. The people were informed, and people stopped drinking the water, and the federal government came into play, started working with the provincial government to introduce some measures. Now, the solution came from a $35 million project funded by the federal government, and this infrastructure still exists. And there's actually a committee that follows up on this contamination, TCE contamination, and they will also hold a meeting soon. So the City of Shannon worked with the federal government. Of course, people were very worried, and the City of Shannon had been expropriated starting from 1914 and to a significant degree for a base of 60 to 65,000 people, and today there's only about 10,000 people left. So to this day, the City of Shannon is associated with this contamination. When people talk about Shannon, they talk about TCE contamination. That is the first thing people end up doing when they visit, for instance. Now, 26 years after, the contamination still exists, and the follow-up committee, as I was mentioning, still exists. And this committee brings together 40, 50 different people from all kinds of backgrounds, environmental groups, DND, the provincial government, citizens groups, and so many experts and specialists have appeared before this committee. And often the meetings also get canceled. I've been the mayor for the last 4 years. I think we've had 2 committee meetings, but there's going to be one on the 2nd of June. So all this to say that after all this work, all this consultation, the contamination still exists. And now I wonder where we're headed in this file. Is it even possible to decontaminate the soil in and around Shannon, given the extent of the contamination, because waters flow and it flows into the rivers and there's a whole system. So we set up this committee initially, but now it's 26 years after the initial notice, we're still trying to find ways of decontaminating if it's possible or if it is even feasible at all. And I know that a lot of money has been invested in answering this question. Now, we had, of course, ties with DND, and we are a small city of 7,000 people, and I don't have a lot of resources. And of course, for a city of our size, it's tough for us to work with DND. That is highly bureaucratic. They don't move fast, and you have people in charge of all kinds of pieces of the infrastructure. Now, the commander is on site. We have exchanges.
Comme ça. Puis en plus, on a...
We also have unexploded ordnance problem that is right next to the city of Shannon. Some areas have been closed. 15, 20 years ago, people were able to enjoy these areas. Now these areas are cut off, and you have ATVs and motorcycles that are using these areas, but the DND actually shut off these areas, but they're not able to enforce because it's quite a large landmass. So today in 2026, the biggest difficulty we have with DND is not the relationships, it's the hierarchy. It's how agile they are. So we have major issues with them. They're going to now build 1,100 new housing units. So there are other issues as well. That's it. And I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Over to you, Serge Valandre. Over to you for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs, membres du comité.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. The City of Terrebonne thanks you for the opportunity to testify as part of your study on contaminated sites. Our presentation will focus specifically on the former Saint-Maurice Test Range, which is a large federal property located in the City of Terrebonne. It covers 6.5 square kilometers, which makes it one of the largest undeveloped sites in the Montreal metropolitan community. This land was used by the DND until 1967 for munition testing and training exercises. No military activities have taken place there for over 50 years, and the site was declared as surplus by the federal government in 2014. Despite having been decommissioned for several decades, contamination remains, and its effects are still being felt today. This area represents an exceptional natural heritage. It consists largely of wetlands, peatlands, and mature forests, and is home to nearly 20 species of flora and fauna with special conservation status. It plays an important role as a reservoir of biodiversity and a carbon sink. The City of Terrebonne fully recognizes this ecological value and supports efforts aimed at the long-term protection of the site, potentially in the form of a protected natural area with controlled public access. However, let's be frank, no lasting protection or safe public use is possible without prior decontamination. As long as unexploded ordnance remains in the ground, this area remains closed, dangerous and unusable, both for conservation purposes and for the community's needs. Now, there are real and urgent municipal needs. For the city of Terrebonne, the issues are very concrete. In particular, the site's contamination prevents a number of things. For instance, the construction of schools, which is necessary to serve the surrounding communities, which are experiencing rapid population growth, improving access to and optimizing an industrial park, which are essential for economic development and job creation, the construction of a U-turn at the end of Saint-Roch Street, which is a key mobility issue and a public service issue, and more broadly, coherent planning for regional development, given the scarcity of land available for housing construction, at least 5,000 units. Terrebonne's intention is to ask the federal government to decontaminate the land and make it available to meet citizens' needs. These needs fall under normal municipal and provincial responsibilities, but they are directly hindered by contamination of federal origin. An example would be the Urbanova Viaduct project on Highway 640. It illustrates this reality perfectly. This major infrastructure project, carried out by the City of Terrebonne in collaboration with the Quebec Ministry of Transport and Sustainable Mobility, requires work on a section of the former Saint-Maurice shooting range. During preparatory work, unexploded ordnance was discovered, despite an initial assessment by the Department of National Defense that had classified the risk as very low. This discovery necessitated specialized decontamination, including the detection, safe excavation, and neutralization of this historical ordnance. The City of Terrebonne had to award a $1.7 million contract to carry out safe decontamination. The project is nearly 2 years behind schedule because of this discovery. Consequently, taxpayers in the City of Terrebonne will have to bear the costs of contamination resulting from past federal military activities. Our message to the community is simple. It's about responsibility and fairness. The federal government must assume the responsibility for the decontamination of these sites. The federal government must compensate the City of Terrebonne for the costs incurred, $1.7 million, to enable the construction of an overpass that is essential to the community's development. Municipalities and citizens cannot and must not bear the financial and operational burden of decontamination alone. A comprehensive decontamination that is planned and funded by the federal government is an essential condition for any transfer of the land, for any real environmental protection, and for any safe public use. To conclude, the Saint-Maurice firing range represents both a legacy of the past, a very real obstacle in the present, and a major opportunity for the future, provided that responsibilities are clearly assumed. The City of Terrebonne wishes to be a constructive partner, but it needs the federal government to fully fulfill its role in order to meet housing and economic development needs. Thank you for your attention, and we remain available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Valandre.
Round of 6 minutes. With you, Monsieur Gaudin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Villandre, for being with us. And thank you to my mayoress of the City of Shannon, Ms. Perrault, for being with us, despite the fact that you were surprised for being invited here, but we'll nonetheless take advantage of your presence here and try to see how the relationship is going between the DND and the City of Shannon. I know that it's a big responsibility on your shoulders. I'll start with the situation as it relates to the contamination. What I understand is that the contamination was detected 26 years ago, and there's been a whole procedure around it, of course. There are committees and meetings, and these groups fought and tried to collaborate within the City of Shannon. But there was a collective case, a class action case, but I think people then withdrew from the case. So can you tell us where things are as we speak? So in the City of Shannon, is the contamination of the water done? And people who drink the water in the City of Shannon are doing so without any risk? Thank you for your question. Well, I'm not an expert but the contamination was concentrated, in fact, in the south section of the city. So there were infrastructure installations that were done. So today, as we speak, people are not drinking the water, but TCE, of course, it contains heavy metals. It goes deep into the groundwater. So the answer is no. There is no one who's drinking contaminated water in Shannon. So this has a negative impact on the value of the lands and on living in Shannon. So as the mayor of the city, that must be impacting you. That no longer has impact on the value of the land, but I would say that 26 years after the fact, when people think of Shannon, they're still concerned about TCE, but in fact, there's no reason for being concerned, and it no longer has any impact on the land value, and it's a magnificent city, as you know. Yes, absolutely. That is why I'm asking the question. Now, do you still have a lot of land that could be developed because you share the land you have with DND and you don't get to control this land that was expropriated? So could you please talk to us about that situation with regard to the development capacity that you have? Because for a city, the revenue increase is heavily dependent on property taxes. So what's the situation? Thank you for the question. Well, we still have land that can be developed, but in 15 to 20 years' time, we will turn into an enclave because we're really surrounded by land that had been expropriated by DND. And sometimes I think they went overboard with what they did in terms of the size of the land they expropriated. And this leaves its mark on the city of Shannon. So we'll end up being an enclave, and we will have development problems. That is for sure. Do you have any relationship with the people in charge of the military base whereby you could maybe acquire some land which is currently DND territory? Well, we have discussions with them. I briefly mentioned the subject. The gentleman from Terrebonne was talking about financial issues with regard to decontamination. Now, we are a small city, and we're faced with a lot of responsibility in these negotiations with the base. Yes, we have relationships with them, and it's perfect. It's excellent. We don't have bad relations with them. But unfortunately, it applies to all other cities that have to deal with DND. The people we're talking to, there's a rotation. They end up changing every 2 years. So every single time we start from scratch, we start the discussions from scratch. And yes, they are using a lot of land. And now there's a project people are talking about 1,100 units of housing. And this is being imposed on you. Yes, it is imposed. There are no discussions. I'm just being informed. So we don't have our say in this, and we don't have a lot of information either. So it's an organizational problem rather than a lack of willingness. Now, Ms. Perro, could you tell us what the financial impact is? Because you cannot, of course, collect property tax from the land that the DND is using. So is there any compensation? And is it being renewed? Is it indexed? Is it adjusted? Well, the compensation, we receive payments for the use of the land, and the base is split across 2 cities. But the large section, the paying section, as I call it, the other city gets its 50% of its revenue from the Valcartier base. And all of that more valuable land, if you will, is on the San Gabriel side of things. And on Shannon's side of things, in terms of real estate value, there is a difference of 7 to 8% difference between the base land and the land that we have. So we are indeed missing out. And sometimes I'm lost in all of this. I don't even know who to reach out to. It's just not fair, because if we're trying to be fair, and that should be the objective, the compensation payment is not fair. So let's hope that the DND is listening, and we'll hear your comments.
Over to Monsieur Watchorn, over to you for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Perro, for being with us. I used to be the mayor of a small city of 5,000 people, and so we have that in common. And Mr. Yulepin, a former DG, is also a common acquaintance. So I'll go ahead and ask some questions. Now, we know that infrastructure is expensive in municipalities, and we always look for ways of funding. When the water system was built, a significant chunk of Shannon's water systems were built from scratch. We can't hear you, Ms. Sparrow. Sorry, 85% is a bit too high, but it is true that a significant chunk of the infrastructure had to be redone. We were doing the water systems, so some of that had to be redone. 85% is a bit high, but it might be close to that. So you have access to relatively new services and infrastructure thanks to this initiative in the urbanized part of the city. I mean, yes, in that part of the city, the streets were redone, and this was about 22 years ago. So it's not brand new today, and the water systems were installed, were constructed, and we were happy with that, of course. Now, my situation is that I'm not challenging what was done in the past. Everyone acted with goodwill, so I'm not trying to look back. I'm trying to look towards the future. So today, in 2026, our relationship with the military base are good, but what I'm saying is that it's tough for a city of 7,000 people to sit down and have a discussion with a military base. I am reaching out to the base. I need to talk to the provincial government, and we're not equipped to do any of this. We're not in charge of the water and sewage systems of the base, and the value of the base went down, so the income or the payments that are made are not sufficient. So it's certainly not fair. I'm not blaming anyone. This was the solution that was found, but in 2026, I think we need to review things, and we need to talk more because the base is in my city. And there's going to be 1,100 units of housing that will be built, but have they thought about the infrastructure, the roads, and we will have more traffic? I'm not against. What I'm saying is that we want to collaborate, but help us help you out. That's all I'm saying. I think that's an excellent message, and it's quite challenging for a municipality to be dealing with the provincial government and the federal government at the same time, because you're not used to dealing with the federal government, and you're in a peculiar situation because there's a base in your city. So it might be a burden, it might be an advantage, depending on the situation. So I'd like to talk about the 1,100 units of housing that will be built on the military base. What are the services that are to be provided by the city to accommodate these 1,100 units of housing? Well, in 1999, we signed an agreement with the federal government. The city of Shannon acquired the road infrastructure, the water and the sewage system. There are some technicalities. I will not bore you with these, but we were responsible for those, and some money exchanged hands. This was in 1999. And today, we are negotiating with the real estate operations unit to review things. But 1,100 units of housing will mean that in 5 years' time, there will be so many more people. They will be on our territory, and they are constructing, and they're not consulting with us where these units of housing will go, what the permits are, what the structures will be like. they don't have to deal with any of that. So I am ready to work and take on this responsibility, and I see this positively, but we need to sit down and talk to each other. There is a road, for instance, that is a bit of a problem with the traffic that we have already, and now you're going to add 1,100 new units of housing. Now, I understand there are other problems that need to be addressed, of course, but in the morning, there is a lot of traffic for people trying to get to the base. And now you're going to add 1,100 new units of housing. So 3 schools, 2 primary schools, 1 Anglophone, 1 Francophone. And in 2025, the Francophone school was already straining under the burden they had. So we had discussions with the DND so that we could accommodate these children. I don't want to have to send these kids to other schools elsewhere. That is one of the issues. I'm not negative, quite the opposite, but did they think about all of these aspects? Well, we had the same experience in our city as well. Even without a military base, moving children from one primary school to another is a big issue, and the communities need to be able to rely on that. These are important discussions. And I think your message, Ms. Perrault, will be heard, and we will make sure that the necessary conversations take place, because these 1,100 units and these new people, these new military personnel, because there's a lot of recruitment going into the CAF these days. Even this year, the numbers have gone up. So it's important for the City of Shannon and for the Government of Canada to make sure that these members of the CAF are welcomed in your city.
Ça va trembler. 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Villandre and Ms. Perrault, for being with us for the opening remarks. Mr. Villandre, I'd like to check or clarify one thing. Now, on the 25th of March, we had the Minister of National Defense and his team at committee. I talked about your case. Terrebonne is an old case, they said, and they hadn't heard about Terrebonne's situation. And Mr. Boudria, for instance, an MP for Terrebonne years ago, had brought the issue up. And they thought that, well, it's of course a negligence and a mistake on the part on the federal government's part. Now, of course, Mr. McGuinty, as the minister, he might not have all the technical details, but we had the deputy minister, Ms. Fox, who was saying that there was funding available for Terrebonne, that this is weird that this is still continuing. So has she called you, is my question. We haven't received any call from the department to talk to us about any subsidies to cover these costs, especially given the fact that these have gone up. It used to be $600,000. Now the bill to decontaminate the site is $1.7 million because of unexploded ordnance. So no calls from Deputy Minister. It's not because Terrebonne didn't pay its phone bills that you maybe missed on that call. So we had that promise made here on open mic and on camera. I mean, it's not even our responsibility. We just want to make sure that the development of our city happens, and it's quite important because we need that road infrastructure, and decontamination needs to happen first, so it's only normal for the federal government to pay for it. So I'm trying to understand one thing, and this will segue us into the second question. DND considered the cost of the operation to be $600,000, but now the real documents have come out, and it's $3.4 million. And you found someone from outside Quebec who would be ready to do the job for $1.7 million. So what's the methodology that was used? How do you explain this? So $600,000 to $3.4 million, it's not even in the same ballpark. You're right. We don't know anything about this file at all, about the decontamination aspect of it, because it's due to unexploded ordnance. So we had to work with D&D and with procurement specialists who gave us an estimation of $600,000. Then a company in Quebec, experts in this matter, they agreed to do the work for $3.4 million, which, of course, we thought was very high given the initial estimate of $600,000. So we had a call for offers Canada-wide, and that is how we ended up with that $1.7 million number, which is still 4 to 5 times the initial estimate. I mean, even if it's lower than 3.5, you're still quite high compared to the $600,000 under the current circumstances. Yes. Well, is this the only area where unexploded ordnance needs to be removed from? Well, we want to develop these sites. There's quite the potential. I briefly touched upon it in my opening remarks. We can build 2 industrial parks, for instance, and develop this area. And there's a Hydro-Québec site, for instance, that's already been developed, and we can potentially build 5,000 units of housing. We know that we need more housing, and we can equip this area with the schools and the industrial park that also will be necessary in this large area. In this protected area, we can build all of this. And of course, there's a housing crisis that we keep talking about. And this area can be used for agriculture or other purposes. Well, we keep saying that this is a contaminated site, but there's unexploded ordnance here. Well, it's not quite clear. For the road infrastructure, we tested the soil. Of course, the testing for that is not exactly the same as what you would do for a school construction or residential housing construction, so it's a bit more complex. So we did some studies to make sure that there isn't dangerous contamination for people who would be using these roads, for instance, or who would be cycling through these areas. So those are the types of the studies that we have conducted. But it's clear that we need to go further, and we need to make sure that this remains the case, and that it is a livable piece of land for the people who will end up here. So this has a significant impact on the development of the city. So it was in 2015 that these lands were handed over, and the assessment was that there was low risk. Now, I know that you're not the experts and you didn't do these studies, but how was that level of risk assessed? And they thought that it was low risk. Well, I cannot comment on how they qualified the different sites, but we acquired this land. It's not the entirety of the thing. It's just one section that was handed over to us for this road project, and we were told that there was very low risk, but I do not know what criteria they used to classify this area as being very low risk. So at that point, D&D promised to go ahead with the removal. So they told you they were going to do that, but now, as we speak, you are having to foot the bill. Well, the responsibility is to remove the munitions from the ground and remove them from the site. So the contract at $1.7 million, that is the subject matter of the contract.
We'll come back. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid I have to use English because my French is non-existent, and the only alternative is Spanish, so which would probably make a mess of us all here. Mr. Villandre, is that the correct pronunciation, Villandre? Thank you very much. You had mentioned that munitions were in the ground there, and I'm wondering, they told you it was low risk, the area that they did. And you ran into munitions. Did they give you any timeline before these munitions become inert in the ground?
Non, nous n'avons eu aucune information.
No, we had no information as to the time it would take for the munition to go inert or the impact this could have. So we had no information on that at all. When the land was handed over to us in 2014, 2015, they reassured us that we could build the overpass, but at no point in time were we told when that might happen. We were just told that there was no danger.
Told any size of munitions, whether they were small munitions, large munitions?
Ce sont des petites munitions, donc
These are
celles qui...
small munitions, the ones that were found in the fall. So small munitions were found. I don't know the calibers. It's not my area of expertise, but all unexploded ordnance is dangerous, of course, and it could hurt someone. So we can't take any risks.
Technical information whatsoever about the site?
Non, aucune
Okay, thank you
information
very
technique.
much.
No technical information.
Thank you. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag here in translation, so if I wait a minute, it's because I'm listening to that. Ms. Farrell, you mentioned that you mentioned a figure of 35 million, and I'm just trying to clarify in my mind here. I'm not clear what that was associated with. Nope, Ms. Farrell? I may be pronouncing it wrong. Perrault.
Non, non, je pense que c'est ça, je m'excuse. 35 millions, en fait.
So $35 million was the money, or rather the cost of the water channel system built around the city of Shannon. Started from in 2005, went until about 2010. So in total, the aqueduct network cost $35 million.
The federal government paid for that then?
Oui,
Okay.
absolument.
Did the military admit that they are the source of the contamination? Was that at any point an issue?
Ben, en fait, dans
Well, in the class action case, it was mentioned clearly that TC is a carcinogenous agent. So there was a court case against the federal government, and the ask was that it was to recognize the connection between TCE and the cancer cases in the city of Shannon. But the sampling taken from the city was not sufficient to arrive at that conclusion. So did DND accept their fault for having contaminated the land? My understanding is that yes, and this contamination was not voluntary. In the 1950s, these solvents were being used, but they didn't know to what point this could become an issue. Did DND, should they have informed us earlier and more about the contamination when they found out, is another question, because they knew for some years when the information got out. But I don't have the details, and I don't know why this was not told. Maybe they ignored, they did not know the fact, they did not know this was happening. I don't know, but I know that the federal government's responsibility was recognized by the courts. So, and then since 2024, 2025, in that time frame, there was some compensation that was paid out to the people who lived in the heavily contaminated area for the inconvenience caused by the contamination, actually, but there was no direct recognition of the disease, of the cancer cases, as being the responsibility of the federal government. This was not scientifically proven because the sampling was too little. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to clarify something else. You had mentioned that the property values have not lowered, they've recouped in any event. Does that mean that the water table, the effects are gone now, or have they remediated themselves through time, or do they still need remediation?
Ben, en fait, la valeur des
The value of these residences didn't decrease. I don't want to tell you something that I'm not sure of. Was there a decrease in sales and housing in Shannon in the beginning of the 2000s? The answer is probably yes. because people were afraid. It was significant contamination, and these are significant. Now, today, the fact that we have a network and we know where contamination is, so having this network ensures that there isn't any direct contamination. It tends to find itself into the soil, and so if there aren't any breaches, there is no danger, but they've got surveillance and oversight, and they do what they can. It's not left without any kind of surveillance, so people are safe in Shannon. There is no contamination. Thank you.
Ms. Idlout, over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. Before I ask my question to each of you, I just wanted to give a little bit of context because I understand this is my first day officially as a member. I'm very excited to join the National Defense Committee. I understand that this is a continuation of a study that started earlier, and in our briefing materials, I did see, for example, that there was already testimony provided by Dr. Wayne, who testified earlier that Canada's Arctic and the North have contaminated sites as well. And he testified by saying that these sites tend to either be forgotten or poorly monitored. And I'm wondering to bridge your experience and to try and make sure that I can have some useful information from you, if you could share some advice or some suggestions for what could improve in terms of relationships between municipalities as well as the federal government, so that we could ensure that these sites that are either forgotten in the North or poorly monitored are getting the attention that they deserve. Maybe I'll ask Sarah to answer first, and then I'll go to Serge after that. Thank you.
C'est une excellente question.
That's a great question. I would have a hard time answering. National Defense is a department that focuses on public safety and needs to follow imperatives that goes beyond the needs of cities. But your question is relevant. How could we do that? We need to share information. We need to act. If we know there's contamination, I know, and I'm not saying that contamination is voluntary, but as soon as we know that there is contamination, we have a social responsibility. National Defense is responsible for public safety, but it also has a social responsibility to ensure the health of those who live in Canada. So this needs to be factored in. Now, regarding the question that your colleague asked, there is no issue with TCE, but the soil in Shannon is contaminated with TCE. We have knowledge now. Will we discover more things in 20 years? I can't say. And so it's always concerning to know that you're living on land that is contaminated. It is a reasonable concern. And so National Defense needs to communicate more clearly and be transparent when there's such a situation, because it undermines trust towards the Canadian government, and that's significant because we need to be open and transparent, and we need to cooperate. Those would be keywords from me.
And you can use up the rest of the time, Serge, if you'd like.
Yes, merci beaucoup. Donc, en fait, j'abonde dans le même sens que Madame.
I have a similar question from Ms. Perrault. This communication is essential. there is a social, economic, and environmental responsibility in working together. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, this is a site that can lead to economic development. We know that we need it. There are challenges in Canada. This is a site that could be used for housing, and that's another important element. We know that there's a program for building more housing in Canada. So we have a site here that could be worked on, and we could work in partnership and communicate together to ensure that the responsibilities are shared, and we can ensure that the decontamination in Terrebonne, that could be under the federal government, and then we can work together and communicate to develop that site and ensure conservation in that area. We're talking about 7 square kilometers there for the development, and that represents only 2 or 3% of the area and would allow for good economic development. But in order to do that, we need to have open and transparent communication with the National Defense. Thank you, Mr. Bélanger. Mr. Savard-Tremblay. We said in the beginning that it was low risk, but in response to a parliamentary petition that was tabled in 2023 by Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés, there were 1,500 signatures from Terrebonne that were asking to accelerate the process, for example, for decontamination. I'm not going to come back to that request, but the response is interesting because in the official response from the government, the department said that preliminary estimations indicate that the site will require a lot of work over 30 years before this zone can be used safely. So low risk, but 30 years before it can be safe? Is there something that I'm missing there? It is a large area, 7 square kilometers, so decontaminating all of that is going to require a lot of work. I don't know what the estimates are or what the data is that would allow them to say that it would take so long. If we want this site to be safe for the population, well, somebody needs to, or rather the federal government needs to take responsibility of that site. They have the information and access to the data to say that it would take up to 30 years. So there's a lack of transparency then. You don't know where that data is coming from. We don't have access to that data. We can't know. So we have to trust them because they are the experts, and we trust the information that they share with us. In 2023, with that petition, 6 years ago, it wanted to accelerate the assessment process to see the number of missiles that were not, and the decontamination work, ensuring that the federal government paid for decontamination as quickly as possible. So that was part of the 3 requests. Are we still at the same place now? To my knowledge, there has been no decontamination work done by the federal government or by National Defense. As I said earlier, we are the ones who need to ensure a follow-up for that decontamination for a very small part of the site in order to allow for the construction of the sewage network. But we would be willing to have a partnership if we could have the site decontaminated. And so we would be able to focus on conservation, build housing, and help build the economy and support businesses. Would you say that what was said to you in 2015, that National Defense would be responsible for this decontamination? Now they're saying they're going to do some of it, but not all of it. Is that very different from what they said to you at the time? I wasn't there in 2015, but what was said to my predecessors was that there would be decontamination, but it has not been done yet. Thank you, Mr. Savard-Tremblay.
Président, et merci, Monsieur Villand.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Villandré and Mayor Perrault, for being with us today. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask my questions in English.
Saddened for what your communities have gone through. And I do have a few questions for the mayor. You mentioned 1,100 houses being built on the base. Is that on or associated playgrounds and park and school, et cetera? Would that be on contaminated land or formerly contaminated land? And if not, would it be close to? You're just, s'il vous plaît, the mute button. Okay. Okay.
Merci.
Yeah.
La question est bonne.
Le mute button, c'est pas mal. OK. Encore une fois, madame.
Merci à vous.
Thank you. Where they're going to be building housing, is it contaminated? I would have a hard time answering you. I don't currently have all the information regarding where that housing is going to build. I know that most, if not all, of that housing will be on my territory, the city of Shannon. But whether or not they are contaminated, they might be. But again, this contamination is underground. There isn't any danger for right now. This is the information that we have. So as long as it doesn't get into the groundwater, it would be fine. And honestly, National Defense is aware of the importance of having a safe environment for those military members, and I say that without a doubt.
Thank you. And may I ask how many people's health has been affected by this over the years? Is there an approximate number?
J'ai pas de
I don't have any specific data for you, but you're talking about something that goes back 26 years. There's an old doctor, and in small cities, stories are shared. There was Dr. Junot. He was a member of the citizens group, and he took care of all of the citizens of Shannon at that time. And there seemed to be more cases of brain cancer, so there would be a cause and effect there between the TCE and brain cancer. So more cancers in that area. But there was a challenge, and it was hard to find all of those who had lived in Shannon. They're military members, and as you know, they are often deployed and they move around. So there was the core of those who stayed in Shannon, the residents of Shannon, but those who were serving members who left the city. It was very difficult to find out where they had ended up. And beyond the cases of cancer, there were a lot of concerns of people who had been significantly contaminated. 100 times the limit for TCE. It was very difficult for those people. There were some residences that were extremely contaminated, and there were a lot of concerns. And there are people who are still living in Shannon, and they are still concerned, and they have a negative experience from that time. I hope that I was able to answer your question.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciated your comment that you said you didn't want to look back, that you wanted to look to the future. And I think that's really positive and healing to hear that. You mentioned review some things, and you also mentioned better communications. Could you please share some positive, concrete steps? And this is your opportunity to speak to the government through the committee. What do you want to see as positive steps as a solution from the federal government?
J'estime, en fait, c'est plus.
I believe that for military bases, they're right at the heart of the city. We have to work together. We need to find solutions. What I'm asking from National Defense is to find a way for us to get together and share our concerns regarding a population that is in my area. We're talking about the 1,100 housing units. There's the security that is offered by national defense, and in 2026, these are still things that we're talking about. National defense is not subject to certain risk criteria, whereas we are. They don't need permits when they build on my land, and so I'm not informed of any new construction. So I would say that if we want to work together, we need to find ways of doing things so that we can share information. There are traffic issues, circulation issues. They have an impact on my city as much as on the national defense territory. So we need to work together. These are communication tools, but the hierarchy at national defense is so dense that I get the impression that sometimes they don't even speak to each other. So perhaps we should see whether or not Construction or Building Canada speaks to different housing companies. So we need the tools to communicate better. Thank you.
1 minute.
Well, it's 5 minutes. You're at 6 already.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Cheeky bugger. Cheeky bugger. Monsieur Mallette, you have 5 minutes on time, right on the nose. Over to you.
Thank you. To the witnesses, désolé, je ne parle pas français très bien.
Apologies, I don't speak French.
Questions in English. Mayor Perreault, I understand that there will be 1,100 units of housing to be built on base in the near future. Do you have any suggestions for what could improve how municipalities and the federal government may work together better in future in these cases where there is contamination? I believe it's further to my colleague's question.
Ben, comme tu sais, je vais
I'll repeat what I said in a way. Beyond contamination, there's also the fact that we can't reproduce what happened in the past, what happened in the 2000s. In 2000, that kind of situation can't happen again. How can we avoid such a situation? Well, we need to work together. I understand that national defense has security imperatives that go beyond the concerns of a city like mine, and I respect that entirely. But what I'm saying is that as soon as we have common concerns, for example, housing and these 1,100 housing units and concerns regarding having space in our schools for our children, and whether they be military children or civilian children, we share this space, so we need to find the tools to work together. Easy tools that would be flexible. As I said earlier, people are very friendly. I collaborate very well, but these people only stay for 2 years. I understand that they have other concerns, but there needs to be other tools for communication, roundtables, for example. I have many ideas.
Monsieur Villandré, I understand you as well. There are 5,000 new units to be built in your community to house more military personnel. 5,000 new units. I understand there's going to be 15. Can you just roughly tell me how much the taxation would be on 5,000 new homes?
La taxe foncière, donc on calcule.
We calculate for every 1,000 units, it's about $5 million. So that would be the cost. But we need to consider the infrastructure costs as well for building that housing. So we need to have clean water infrastructure, for wastewater treatment as well. We need to build roads. And so this represents significant funding for infrastructure. So we're talking about tens of millions of dollars from the municipality and from proponents in order to build those 5,000 housing units.
For the UXO cleanup, I guess, is in that formula as well?
Donc, cette
So this amount that we are required to pay, it is for land that did not belong to us. So we thought that it shouldn't be up to us to pay for the decontamination. And if we need to build these 5,000 units, this new section of the land needs to be decontaminated. And in all that I've been explaining, it's just 3% of the land. So it would take a year rather than 30 years to decontaminate the land we would need to start building. So that will be the level of the time and effort, if you will, to go ahead and decontaminate the site.
Merci.
Merci. We're going off to Ms. Gallant now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the Mayor of Shannon. With the 1,100 new units, what amount would your community be receiving for grants in lieu of essentially the revenue from the federal government for having the extra housing on that base?
En fait, merci pour.
Thank you for your question. Maybe I wasn't very clear. It's National Defense that's building on its own land, so they are responsible for all of the construction. Now, I don't know what the structure would be. I'm assuming it will be multiple units in these structures. I don't know how many buildings will go up. I really don't have a number, but at that point there will be an assessment done by our assessors and the assessors on the base as to the value, and then the payment that is due will be calculated based on that. So we have quite a low tax level, so that's how the calculation will be done. But in Shannon, the average would be 400 to 600,000. So I don't think these new units of housing will be worth that much on the base, but it will have to be assessed against the criteria we have. But these units, once again, won't be the same value as the units in the city because of due to the nature of the buildings. I don't know if this answers your question.
Familiar with military housing, it is not the same quality as on civilian land. So you mentioned that the land value on base, for which you're getting the grants in lieu of payments from the federal government, had declined in value. Was that because they took down buildings, or is there some other reason why your payments from the federal government for having the military base in your municipality have gone down?
En fait,
well, these are old buildings. That's one thing. Compared to houses built in Shannon, again, the average value for single-family homes in this small city, they have a lot of land. So that might be part of why that difference exists, and also an assessment difference between what the city does and what National Defense does. But in our city, we have small companies, Canex companies, that are not up to snuff. These are quite old structures, old buildings, which have not gone up in value. So, but in the city of Shannon, in our side of things, if you will, values have gone up. Now, I was also saying that, in fact, there are two cities. There's Saint-Gabriel de Valcartier, they have higher values, admin buildings, research center, also on the base, but in the territory of the city. So when you calculate these grants in lieu of payment, the formula no longer matches the reality. I don't know if it's the same elsewhere, but in our region, it's no longer fair. It no longer represents the situation in 2026. It's just not fair.
Of the serving military personnel live on the base presently?
Oui, ils vivent.
Yes, they live there. I'm in my office, and I have a view over the residences to my left to National Defense, and to the right there are residential areas of the city of Shannon. So we share the same land, and the children of the military families, they go to the same school as other residents. So it's one single community, and a lot of CAF members choose to buy homes in our city as well. But as we were saying, you know the reality, of course, as you were saying, but members of the CAF, of course, move around quite frequently. Sometimes they live on DND land or bases. And these 1,100 new units, of course, there's a real need for this, for the housing. And members are looking for more appropriate housing in 2026. They renovated some buildings, but these are not recent buildings. I think they're from the 50s or the 60s. But it's one shared community, the same library, the same school. Our residents go on base territory for sports and exercise. So it's just one community, the way I see it. We are part of the same city, and we share the services. That's how I see it.
Currently being monitored?
Oui, comme je vous disais tout à l'heure, il y a un comité de suivi.
Yes, as I was saying, there's a follow-up committee. There's a team that works on that. And I try to keep up, but we have 2 meetings per year. We'll have one in June. It's quite complicated, but my understanding is that, yes, the TCE plume is being tracked because it moves around. Of course, it's been 25, 26 years. It has moved around. But do we have solutions, realistic solutions, that are actually feasible? I'm not sure. 25 years after. And I was listening to the other witness from Terrebonne. Of course, decontamination is not simple. It's a major challenge. How do you decontaminate? Because we also have ordnance, unexploded ordnance in our city, and a lot of land was just shut off for that. If it was easy, if it was simple, of course, we would have done it by now. These are major challenges.
Monsieur Earl, welcome, and over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to the witnesses. And I'd like to direct my first couple of questions to Mayor Perreault. You talked a lot about the committee that works collaboratively with yourself as the mayor. I just want to understand the structure of that committee a little bit further. Who participates in it? Is it members of the CAF with the municipality, other municipalities that are adjacent? Because as I listen to you describe it, it sounds like your city, your municipality is a bedroom community to the base.
En fait, c'est un comité qui est présidé par...
Well, the chair of the committee is the base commander, and you have representatives from the military base, representatives from Quebec City, because some of their land was also impacted. There are representatives from the city of Shannon. There's a citizens group, a number of environmental groups, I think, a regional environment council, representative from Quebec Department of Environment, from the federal Department of Environment. Yes, there's collaboration, but we meet twice a year, so it's not optimal. It's a good committee, but the work they do on a day-to-day basis, I cannot really answer your question on that. I receive information here and there. Last year, we had an update from a water treatment facility, and we only found out because a citizen was asking for a key to go open a gate. So it's not really very efficient. It's not agile. That's what I would say about that committee. Now, were they trying to hide something? I don't think so, because it's out there for all to see. But as we speak, I don't know what the latest on that is. And I need to pick up the phone and start calling people to find answers. So I have to really work hard to get that information. And every single time, it's an added concern. Are we collaborating? Are people hiding stuff? It triggers the same trauma in people. Are we safe is the question. I think, yes, we are. But every single time, it erodes the trust. And it's quite serious. And I think we shouldn't find ourselves in these situations if our aim is to work together. This structure is far from being perfect. National Defense needs to improve its relationship with us because they live in our city right next to us. They have social responsibilities which they need to live up to as much as they are responsible for the security of the country.
Really, really appreciate the answer and some really good context, actually. Early in your testimony, you talked about a reduction in population in your community. I believe I heard a number, just doing the simple math on it, as much as 3,000 people from the municipality less today than it was a few short years ago. Is that directly correlated with reduced activity on the wing, or is there some other factor that's leading to that population decline that you described?
Je sais pas que.
I don't know what you understood, but that's not what I said. The population of the city of Shannon is actually growing constantly. Every year, new people come and settle. We now have 7,000 people. We also acquired part of the base that expanded the territory of the city. We have about 1,500 people living on the base. As far as we know, but our city is about 7,500 or so, and about 1,500 on the base, according to our information. But the population did not go down. It's actually going up. Maybe I misspoke, and I apologize.
Understood, so I do apologize for that. And I think that's good news, because I was concerned that the population may have been declining because of people's fear of the contamination and the related carcinogenics and cancers that may be thereto related. So it is good news that it's going up. My next question is for the mayor from Terrebonne. Really appreciated your presentation and how you summed it up by saying there's a legacy of the past. That's identified. Then there's the obstacles of the present and the opportunity of the future. For the minute that I have left, maybe for me and for the committee, just a little more detail on the obstacles of the present. I know we talked about the ordinance, talked a little bit, I believe, in your related testimony about the cleanup, how it's delayed, it's more cost effective, the work is being done by a company from out of the country. Talk a little bit more to us in that regard, please.
Merci pour votre question. En effet, donc.
Thank you for the question. We are planning the construction of an overpass to unite our different communities, and this has been in the works for the past 10 years. When we put out a call for tenders, when we were going to go ahead with cutting down some trees, we first became aware of unexploded ordnance, so that put a halt to everything. Because we had no expertise whatsoever, we, of course, had to work with National Defense to find a solution. That is how we decided to put out a call for tenders based on the information we had at the time. So this overpass, if it's not built, it's going to hinder the development of the 5,000 units of housing that I referred to on the land that belongs to the federal government that is contaminated with unexploded ordnance. But there's also this whole chunk of land to the south of the highway that would actually open the possibility of building 20,000 units of housing. So this overpass is essential for the development of the city of Terrebonne, for economic development, and for just building these houses. So that needs to be done. But when unexploded ordnance was discovered, everything got delayed by 2 years immediately. All of that work to unite the two different communities. And also, as I was saying, because this is not municipal responsibility, detecting and removing this unexploded ordnance, that is why we are where we are today. So this responsibility falls on the National Defense and the federal government. I hope this answers your question.
7 minutes allocation. Over to you, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay. I'm going to give you a little extra too.
Merci, ben c'est bien gentil. En fait, j'en aurais peut-être
Thank
pas
you. That's very kind of you, but I might not need it after all, because I got the information I was after. I would like to ask Ms. Perrault, because she was saying that she has a lot of ideas. Well, there's going to be a report at the end of this study. If you have recommendations, this is the time for it. Please share these with us. We're here to hear your recommendations. Well, thank you for the question. I mean, beyond the hierarchy in the national defense and all the units and everything, well, it's impossible to understand the structure if you have not been in the forces yourself. So the initiative has to come from the national defense. They should try to figure out how we can find a solution with decontamination, but also work in committee setting that actually moves fast. Now, I can reach out to the government of Quebec, or National Defense can reach out to the government of Quebec, but we need to just sit down and work together and deal with this with these issues. The school board no longer exists, but we have schools that will probably no longer have any capacity left by 2026, by the end of this year. And the closest school is 15, 20, 25 kilometers away. So we need to work together to raise awareness about the school situation. Now, do we expand the Bravoure Road, or some other solution might also come into play? If we don't do that, there will be some collateral damage. So we need to work together. Under what format, I don't know. I have some ideas. It could be done anyway, but I'm ready and open. Okay, marvelous. If you want to add something, this is the time for it. Well, for instance, with the grants in lieu of payment, one problem I have is not knowing who to reach out to, the base commander or someone else. Of course, as a city of 7,000 people, we don't have lawyers, we don't have the resources, and we don't necessarily always move fast. My DG is working hard, but all this to say that it's just not easy. I'm working on it. I'm just trying to find a solution. Of course, I have contacts on the base. They are my go-to people, if you will, but they don't have all the answers. They take my question, then they ask the question to someone else. Of course, there's the security component of all this. But I have people who need to go through the base, to go through other communities, and there are safety issues. When people are cycling, for instance, they are not supposed to be doing that. These are not details. These are all important matters, and we just want to keep sharing these issues of safety and flexibility, and there are companies on the base, and they're cannibalizing the companies in our city. 30 years ago, that was okay because there was nothing else, but now we have a city, and we're having a hard time doing economic development because we have a small market, a small pharmacy, and these are simply not adequate for 2026. So it's all of this, that is the reality that we are living, and I need someone to hear my voice. Thank you.
Over to you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Madame Perrault.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Perrault, I have a question for you. Municipalities in Quebec, they are a provincial creature. They are the creation of the government of Quebec. In Quebec, they need to go through these structures. You know all of the acronyms, of course, because you have worked with the provincial government before. Now, I understand your problem. You're the mayor of a city of 7,000 people. You want to improve the quality of life for these people. You want your municipality to grow and prosper. But you have a taxpayer that is not necessarily paying at the level they should be. So, and you want to be masters in your own home. How can the government of Quebec help you improve the relationship? Does it take a tripartite committee? What can we do to facilitate the communication? Because you are in the middle of this operation, but you're limited by the government of Quebec, by national defense. You're responsible for the schools. You are responsible for public safety, but you're not really masters in your own home. So what are some key recommendations that would help the federal government to find a solution? You said, well, you don't know what's going on elsewhere. Well, me neither. We only have a number of examples, Shannon, Valcartier, and a couple others. But how can we make it easier for these entities to coexist and collaborate, national defense and the different cities in Quebec, but across Canada, a global approach? Because we talk about red tape and the hierarchy at national defense being too heavy, and there's a lot of energy that is being wasted, a lot of money that is being wasted, and we add another layer in Quebec because you cannot directly reach out to the federal government entities. So help us help you. Please tell us how we can help you to make sure that these problems get resolved and Shannon can grow and become a more attractive municipality that I would, of course, be happy to represent as MP for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. There are 26 municipalities. You have the lowest tax level. So I would like us to work together, Ms. Perrault, if you can help us.
Je suis une créature.
I'm a creature of the provincial government, and I say things as I think them. The provincial government can better negotiate this kind of situation than I can. I'll give you an example. If I have an issue, we've talked about it, so a safety issue. I said it earlier. I have to follow these risk management rules, and so national defense is responsible for safety. I have some responsibilities, but I'm not a first responder, but I will be responsible for safety on the roads. And so going beyond that issue, there are other issues, and I want to say this well. People who are working. A firefighter wants to put out a fire. So a firefighter on base, if I say that he won't be able to put out a fire, they won't be able to put out a fire, then they'll have an issue with that. They want to put out fires. It's the same for us. We're waiting for legal advice, but if I'm told, and this is my reality, if I'm told, Ms. Perrault, you're not responsible for safety, they're responsible for it, do I have to verify then that the public safety criteria for national defense are the same that are being imposed on me? If I have to have 4 firefighters in a fire station, or 8, do they have the same requirements? Is that my responsibility? I'm trying to ask questions, and I'm not receiving any answers. So I said to National Defense, you have lawyers, you're an organization that is quite more significant, so give me legal advice, tell me what I can base myself on, and then I will reach out to the provincial government and ask for a signed agreement, because if I want one of these agreements, it needs to be with the Quebec government, because I can't have one directly with the federal government, and that is complicated, and it makes things more complicated. Thank you, Mayor Perrault.
And concern. I think all of us recognize the concerns that you face and those in Terrebonne as well. I'm going to give the last question to Ms. Raminato, if you want to wrap up.
Mais le fait que j'ai pas beaucoup de temps, je veux juste.
I don't have a lot of time, so I just wanted to mention to Mayor Perrault, when my son was in Valcartier, he had to stay in Shannon. So I know your city very well, and as Parliamentary Secretary for National Defence, I am very pleased to work with your MP, Joël Godin. So I will follow up with him to see how we can work together in order to get you answers. And for Mr. Villandry, I spoke with your MP as well regarding the issues that you're facing in Terrebonne. I understand that he's been debriefed and we will be receiving additional information. I think they received their briefing this week, and so we should have more answers. Thank you.
Attending today, I appreciate your comments. I'm going to suspend in a few minutes, but before I do, I need to ask the members around the committee if the PIP interns can stay for the in-camera portion that's about to proceed. Okay, this committee is suspended. Thank you again to the witnesses.
Bye.